Good evening, everybody. Good evening, and I thank all of you for coming out and supporting this tonight. Welcome to Black and White. I'm your host, Malcolm Jarell. I am a poet, I'm an activist, and I have a lot to say about what's going on tonight. Tonight, we'll be taking a look at race in America, and we'll be asking the question, are we really safe? And that will be the theme of tonight. And we'll be all throughout tonight just asking that question and honing in on that. Are we really safe in America? The first topic of this segment that I wanted to talk about, because I'll just jump right in. Well, first off, I want to have a moment of prayer. There's so much going on right now, and we have to just pause for a moment and look to the Father. So I ask all of you who are watching tonight to just pray with me for a moment. Father, in the name of Jesus, Lord, we come to you in a state right now of unrest. Lord, we come to you in a state of uncertainty. But Lord, we know that you are the master and you hold the final say. Lord, I pray, oh God, that the families of George Floyd find peace, Lord, in your comfort and in your care. Lord, I pray, oh God, that the families of all those who are protesting right now find safety. Lord, and I pray, oh God, that you can give us your word as to how to move forward from all of these rioting and these protest movements. Lord, give us your word as to how to move forward in action. Lord, I pray, oh God, tonight as we discuss these issues and as we look at the state of African American people in this country, Lord, I pray, oh God, that you give me strength, Lord, and that you give me courage, Lord, to say the truth and speak your truth. Lord, and let the words of my mouth, Lord, and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight. And I pray, oh God, that you call it done in your name. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. And now I want to have an 8-second moment of silence for George Floyd and his family and all those who are suffering right now. So if you all will. Thank you. And now I want to draw your attention to a poem I have written. It's in my current book of poetry, Speak Now. And the poem is called History Yet Speaks. Gather your young here to the foot of my mountain, and I will show you those who have climbed here before. Mothers, for long, have cried heavy and burdensome tears, seeing their daughters and sons deprived of their years. The dirge they sang springs up from ancestral souls, from the mothers that mourned in the days of old. History yet speaks. Fix your attention on this silent war, an ever raging struggle, the genocide of youth, where justice has failed. A new struggle, fueled by unrest, quickly begins. Rioters charge forth, their hands rolled in fists, seeking to stake their claim, searching for one to blame. Others trudge on ignorant, blind, and not listening as the hatred deepens and the bullets continue whistling. History yet speaks. I have questioned your system and have challenged your courage repeatedly. I have seen you cower in fear of moving forward. I have reminded you of horrors not long departed. Even the trees, though innocent, cry out for the helpless ornaments left hanging and swaying from their heightened branches. Voices from Selma and Birmingham, from the deep, dark, muddy banks of the Mississippi echo to you today, pleading you to remember and forget not their names. And many names there were, martyred and slain, carrying the banner, though bloodied and stained, further beyond that racist shore, history yet speaks. Thank you. And I read that poem, and I wanted to share that poem with you all because in this current climate that we're in, it would seem as though history is repeating itself. It would seem as though my generation, which is 50 generations from, or 50 years from the civil rights movement, it would seem as though we're struggling with the same issues. We're still trying to find solutions and answers to these same problems. And I like to think of a new struggle has been fueled by this unrest, by the fact that justice, in a sense, has failed us. And we take to the news anytime something like this happens. We take to the streets to protest, and we gear up for all manners of activism. But then, for some reason or another, after we've had endless conversations about what we can do as Black people to move ourselves and each other forward, for some reason, we see it happen again. And here we are with, I believe, the ultimate question: are we really safe? Due to the state of unrest, due to the multiple and what seems countless killings of Black people in the hands of police, the police brutality, and the systemic racism that comes along with that, it just bears to ask the question: in 2020, in America today, are we as Black people, are we as African Americans who go to work every day, who vote, some of us vote, are we really safe in today's America? And I believe that question needs to be asked, and we need to really talk about what we can do to ensure our safety, not only ours, but our children and generations to come. So I have a little bit for you, and I'm going to invite on a dear friend of mine, Miss Princess Frenchie.
Oh my goodness.
To come on and discuss these things with me
Well,
so that we
interesting.
can open up some conversation for you all.
Thank you so
And
much,
I would
Malcolm.
like,
Thank you for having me. So I do have a question for you. I want to start off with that because you said something that was interesting, talking about a new struggle. Can you tell me what you mean by a new struggle?
to me, and I can say from my personal experience, I grew up in, or I would say I grew up in an America where racism didn't meet me at my front door, so to speak. There wasn't segregation or any of those things that were happening. Even the view of police brutality. I didn't growing up. I didn't see that too too often, but it seemed as though after the Obama administration, and we can get into that a little later, but after the Obama administration, my eyes was open to a new struggle in my generation to fight against hard policing, to fight against uh, to pick up the struggle of systemic racism, but a new struggle of fighting against police brutality in our communities and the multiple and mass killing of Blacks
Well,
in this
what,
current society.
the
That's
reason I say that because it's not a new struggle, and I mean
it's not new.
it's not new. It's
It's
just
not.
that
It's
what
it's
has
not at all.
happened is, truth be told, Malcolm, what has happened is because technology is now more public and more out there,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
so
And that's yeah.
yes, I don't think it's a new struggle. And I'll give you an example because I got information. I talked to my mother probably a month ago, and unbeknownst to me, maybe a month or two ago, unbeknownst to me, she lost one of her cousins um, who was murdered because he was dating a person not African American. So,
Wow.
So it's definitely not a new struggle. It's just becoming more public because of the technology has been able to capture what our community has been suffering for so long. It's
Absolutely.
and I have to be honest. I think that during the Obama presidency, what we begin to see was that the pot even got more stirred up. And so a lot of things that we are witnessing or seeing is that stirring the pot. And then as we've transferred to a different administration, that pot even got thicker, and people who had refrained from doing some stuff are now coming out. The Bible talks
Right.
about out of the heart the mouth speaketh. So now we're seeing even more evidence as what is in the heart of people. Not all people, so understand
Right.
that. And I'm going to even challenge you on something that you said one time. For some reason, I think your video's frozen. I can hear you.
Yeah, I can. It looks as though it froze a little bit.
Yes, okay, I can hear you, but you're like, unless you are really good, you know.
Oh
But
no.
one of the things that you came on one of our shows called Artist Box, and you mentioned a thing called anti-racist, anti-racism, racism. Do you remember that?
Yes.
So before we go into are we safe in America, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, definitely, and that's a topic that I kind of like to talk about sometimes. Stokely Carmichael, who was a 1960s civil rights activist, he changed his name. He eventually exiled to Africa, and he changed his name to Kwame Ture. He said in a 1966 speech at Berkeley that black people have the issue with anti-racist racism. We will hate the oppressor. We will hate what the oppressor has done to us. We will hate the actions of the oppressor, but we will also then turn around and cast that same sort of hate on each other.
Okay.
And that essentially, he was saying that essentially cancels out the the passion behind being against your oppressor. It's like if you will go to the protest rallies, if you will go to and support to different causes, but then come home and have no compassion for your neighbor, or the brother that is in arm's reach of you, then it's like how solid is your philosophy, or
Mm.
how firm are your beliefs.
Okay, yeah, I see that. That is definitely a topic for another show because you said a couple of things that um, it does tie into your question of whether or not we are safe in America. Yet, but there's so much in that concept, and I don't necessarily believe that they're necessarily connected in that perspective. And that also goes on to the concept of classism. So you're
Right.
asked the question, are we safer in America? And I will come to the conclusion that you are referring to um, us as being African American. Let me ask, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Oh, okay, you're trying to unfreeze yourself.
Yeah.
Understood, understood. Um,
Goodness gracious.
hey, technology. Just think, we're in Virginia. We're in phase
Yeah.
two, so we'll be in the studio soon. So we'll
And
overcome some of these.
I tell you, I live in Amish country down here in Mechanicsville, Maryland, and I do get very good service here, but I'm down in the country a little. So
Understood. So
yeah.
overall, do I feel that as a are we safe overall? In if I look at it overall, I will say I do feel safe in America. I'm just going to speak that on my behalf, from my perspective, from my situation. That does not
Right.
relate to other people. Here's why I say that. I'm not policed in my neighborhood the way other neighborhoods are policed.
Right.
So you gotta understand that also. And also, um, what I don't know and I don't have in front of me is the statistics as to how many African American. Oh, there you go. What's up? How many African Americans? You're back, bro. Thank you. How many African Americans are actually abused by the police? We don't have those statistics. I think that,
Right.
and we are seeing the numbers go up, but and actually we don't know how many people. We don't know if the percentage is high or low. It feels awful.
Right.
I mean, it feels like, oh
Right.
my goodness. And the more the pot is stirred up, and I'll give you the perfect example. Several years ago, when they had the demonstrations in Charlotte here in Virginia, and you see the Confederate flags start coming out. What I felt before more comfortable, all of a sudden my comfort level got shaken a little bit. Not necessarily from
Right.
the law enforcement. I'll be honest with you. I didn't feel threatened by my law enforcement in my neighborhood. I felt more threatened by the other people around me,
Right.
which is a little different than what's going on. One of our cry is that we want reform in law enforcement. But again, for me, I don't feel unsafe or I don't feel threatened about law enforcement. My concern is when I'm walking through the streets, just doing absolutely nothing. And this is actually what happened. And someone rev up their car like they want to run me over. You want to change me
Right.
real quick. I'm going to speak in tongues, but you're going to understand me. You know? So not law enforcement. This is a citizen. So those things, that's what concerns me in terms of my safety wise. Again, law enforcement, I make myself have a relationship with my local law enforcement, and I think later on, some down here in your topics, you even bring up some of the actions that we can to do, and
Right.
and one of those is developing those relationships. So is Black American safe? It really going to depends on what pocket you are, because I'm telling you,
Right.
I have traveled throughout the U.S. from Seattle, which is my home, to Atlanta, Georgia, drove, and there's some states that I will not drive through at night, period. I'm just going to be upfront and honest. But there are some states, the closer north I am, the more comfortable I feel. It wasn't until I got closer to the East Coast that I felt more racial tension, I'll be honest. Believe it or not. And so, but I know that there are people out there that get stopped, especially our African American brothers, that get stopped by cops for no apparent reason, or reason like your tail light stop. My tail light ain't out, bro. What's up with that? You know, and I have a unique perspective because I serve in the military. And for the first 5 years of my active duty service, I was a military police officer. And the interesting thing, you didn't know that, but the interesting thing
No, I
is
did
that,
not know that.
yeah, so I have a different perspective because there are some things inherited where you do have to use caution. And I'm giving an example. And even as a Black woman in America, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to put it out there. I know I'll get a whole lot of emails. I'm okay with that. But if there is a brother that's going to come up to me looking a certain way, I'm going to grab my purse just a little tighter. So if I'm going to do that and I'm in the community, what do we expect someone else who's outside of the community is? I'm not saying that we are to become them to make them more comfortable, but sometimes, truth be told, I'm not comfortable. No, so that's
Right.
another discussion. So overall, I think overall, as a race, I do think we are safe. I think that in our country, with some of our laws and some of how our practices are, there are issues that we must address. And I know that in the outline that you sent me, you have outlined so wonderfully some of the amendments and acts that has been implemented in our nation. And what I did not see on here was, which I'm surprised, was something that Obama put in place before in his, I think his last few years in office, And I don't know if you're even tracking currently what they're trying to get through the House. I think it's HR 40 in reference to some things in terms of reform. So I believe that even though we have certain things, like for instance, you put the Voting Right Act on there.
Right.
Voting is dear to my heart. So you got the Voting Right Act of 1965, which guaranteed voting rights, I'm going to read your own words, and abolish restrictive measures. What good is that act if we don't register to vote or go out and vote?
Right.
So
right.
You got me all stirred up. I'm supposed to be quiet.
But see, I feel like it begins with asking those questions. Having a taste and a desire for knowledge enough to ask those questions in order to be educated and then make the determination. In the 60s, during the civil rights movement, there was a part of the movement that was dedicated to the registering of poor blacks in rural communities that may have been completely illiterate.
Mm-hmm.
They may not have had access to different types of mainstream things. They didn't have vehicles to travel in the town to get to the polling places. So there was a smaller movement created around going into those communities and educating those black people and educating their children and then registering people to vote, not just going haphazardly and getting people to write their names and they don't know the impact of what's going on here. They don't know how strong their one vote is. So they had to use forms of education and methods of education to inform the people so that they could make a knowledgeable vote come the time for election.
Okay, okay. So let me ask you a question based off the information that you provided, looking at different laws and amendments throughout the year. Now,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't remember. I think I was on the Congressional Black Caucus call, and I'm not exactly sure who said this, but somebody said in reference that we can change laws. We can actually have all types of reforms. But the one thing that we cannot change is someone's heart. So,
That's right.
and what we have seen is that even in the midst of everything that's going on, some of the things that's happening is because people's hearts not changed. There may be rules and regulations in place, but if your heart hasn't been changed, and I know you're going to talk about the church later on, I mean, abolishment, you talk about the 13th Amendment in terms of abolishing slavery, you got the 14th Amendment here, extended U.S. citizenship. I mean, you list them all there. God bless you for your research and your diligence. The Civil Rights Act. But again, we can regulate as much as we want behavior for a little time. But there got to be somewhere, and this is not even for us to do. We don't have the capacity to change someone's heart.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to turn the show back on to. I've talked too much. Now I'm on my little pulpit. Now you got me all worked up. So let me switch that question on you. Do you, as a black man in the U.S., do you feel safe?
I can tell you right now, I feel as though the safety I've had has been shaken, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to use that as a topic to ask, because with George Floyd's death, that was another brutal killing in the hands of the police. But you have to look at Breonna Taylor's death.
Good. Go ahead. Talk about that.
See? And you have to look at Brother Ahmaud's death.
Okay.
And think about the status of how they were killed.
So wait a minute. So is it that your safety has been shaken, or that your awareness has awakened you? Two different things. Because your safety has always been the same.
Right. Right, because essentially we're protected, or we ought to be protected by these laws that have been passed. And it was funny because when you said we can change the laws, and I've heard that we can change laws, we can make legislation, and it could be null and void if the hearts of the people won't change. And it reminded me of something that Stokely Carmichael also said, where he said the civil rights laws weren't passed for black people. It may look as though it may have been written as though there were benefits for black people, but the civil rights laws in America were essentially passed for white Americans to be told this is how they ought to be treated. This is the status that they ought to have. So yeah, we benefited from it just being written into law, but the ideology around it wasn't for us. We fought for it so that our people could benefit from it. We fought and died for it, but essentially it was on the books to tell someone else that we have rights to citizenship, that we have liberty and justice, as they say, for all. And that's something that's something to look at. That could turn into
a
whole
hour.
nother thing. Yeah, but I honestly feel for me, because I see these things happening, because I wondered why there are gaps in the system to the point where someone could be sleep in their bed and be killed on accident. How does that happen? A brother jogging, just jogging, something that all of us, any everyday American has done. He's jogging down the street, just having fitness, and someone comes and kills him in cold blood. Not to mention how long it took to see any glimmer of justice with that case, but the fact that it's gotten to a point where we can't even jog down the street. Sometimes we can't even sleep in our own beds at night peacefully without being threatened with the systemic racism, if you will, with the police brutality and those gaps in the system that all of us have to pay attention to as Americans, not from any different race or any different class, but the fact that on our books there are gaps in the system that leave some of us and even the most vulnerable of us in our communities unsafe. And who are the first to be the most vulnerable? People of color, because of those gaps in the system.
So with those gaps in the system, now I'm going to kind of combine two thoughts here. With those gaps in the system, say that there are policies implemented under one administration. And so you're plugging in some of those gaps there. And then another administration moves in. And I'm not only looking at the federal level, but I'm also looking at even local level, all the way down to the local level.
State and local.
Because sometimes we get confused. Like, I'm not saying just go vote once every 4 years.
Right.
Because to make the real changes, it's got to be at the local level. But to say you have one administration and you got one set of rules that come, I gotta write a note. Make sure I don't forget to bring this up since we're talking about this. A new administration comes in and begin to dissolve those practices, so to speak. And it appeared, because I was listening the other day to a young man by the name of Tony Williams. And he's a fired up young man, but some of his information was quite interesting. But one of the things that he talked about was that here we go again. We talk about reform. We've talked about that already. We talked about, now he brought up something which I kind of put a big old question mark on. He talks about abolishing the police. And I thought that was interesting because, okay, let's go down that road for a minute. I appreciate his zealous. I appreciate his energy. But let's go down that road for a moment. Because I want us to think, especially young people, because you guys have the strength, you guys have the endurance. And so if we were to abolish the police, then did you tell me at the same time that crime has disappeared? I'm just asking the question. Right. And so it also goes alongside of the concept in terms of reform or concept or action. Let's defund the police. Again, my question is, when did crime stop in America?
Right.
So we got to be careful. I know we're angry. We're raged. We're mad. But we got to come up with actions that is not going to put us in a worse situation. Somebody got to protect me from something.
Absolutely.
So I just, and I wanted to tie that up with unions, police unions. Mm-hmm. I know. I should have sent you my notes, huh? And this is my last point.
No, I love it.
Because we're saying that there needs to be reform, and we're targeting the police. Police do this, but we haven't included the unions who are fighting against some of these changes. And at the same time, I'm going to ask you this. What are you also putting in place to protect the police? Because if you don't realize, police are getting killed too. There are some law enforcement that don't go home at night simply because they're doing their job protecting us.
Right.
And I don't see sometimes the same outrage.
And a lot of them are black.
And a lot of them are black, and a lot of them are not.
Yeah. Right.
So, okay, that was my moment. I think I'm over it now. I'll come back when you get to the church.
Well, I do want you to come back to talk a little bit about the spiritual outlook.
Yeah, I'll come back at that time. So I'll hang out and watch and see what's going on Facebook, who's yelling at me, what kind of emails.
Okay. So, and I thank you again, Ms. Frenchie, for coming on and sharing, because we're all fired up. We're all fired up. And I feel like it just takes that fire sometimes to encourage an honest conversation, to ignite an honest conversation about what we aim to do to change some of the things and what we aim to do to ensure safety and to ensure that we all remain safe.
Yes.
And that we stay safe within this country. That's where it all starts is having the passion, but having the courage enough to address the topic and take it head on. So I thank you for
all right, I'll be back when you need me.
Oh, absolutely. So I wanted to take a look at, and I just wanted to do an overview on George Floyd's killing. I won't really go into detail about the actual video, the actual situation, but I just want to talk about what it stirred up in us. This hasn't been the first situation. This hasn't been the first time that we've seen this, but with this particular instance, I feel as though we've reached a boiling point in America. We've reached a time where we can truly say that we have had enough. I don't agree with the rioting. I don't agree with the burning and the looting. But what I will agree with is that it shows the dark underside of issues that have gone undealt with for so many years that we've been suffering with. We've been at the forefront of brutality. We've been at the forefront of the war on drugs and all of these different laws, some laws that have been passed that have been to the detriment of Black lives in America. So much so to the point where we are now trying to remind people that we matter. We matter with these killings that constantly happen, and the trauma that goes along with that, and the state of unrest and the uneasiness that it creates for this current generation. I really feel like we have to look at what we can do beyond the rioting, beyond the protests. Yes, we all are mad. We all are upset, and we all feel emotionally toward this particular incident, not just this one, but all of them. We feel strongly about all of it. So what can we do? And I wanted to, and on my notes I have here, rioting, protesting, and political action. And I wanted to kind of look at different protest movements throughout history that required political action along with the protesting in order to bring about foundational change. And one of the biggest ones is the civil rights movement of the 60s. There was protest movements constantly going on for for the full spectrum of rights for black people, for better jobs, for better housing, for all these different benefits, for equality, for desegregation, and for integration, and for voting rights. It was so many different things going on at one time, but there was political action alongside the movement. There was people going and lobbying for the passage of these laws that we've mentioned, especially the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which gave voter registration equality. But then the Civil Rights the Voting Rights Act that followed the following year guaranteed voting rights and abolished those restrictive and prohibitive measures. It was due to those marches, those scheduled marches, those organized events, and the political action devoted to it. Even during the March on Washington, yes, there were hundreds of thousands of people on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial to hear these speeches, to hear the history being made. But at the same time, there was also delegates from the organizations from SNCC and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference that Dr. King was a part of. He had members of those organizations going to Capitol Hill and lobbying for the passage of these laws. And we even have photos of him with President Johnson at that time, discussing how important it was to pass laws to ensure that we change how Black people are being treated. We change how Black people are able to register. Now, granted, move ahead 50 years, we can see that the heart of the situation hasn't really changed, but there were laws passed to ensure those benefits to us. And I feel like today we have to have solid demands, firm demands. We can't move about haphazardly and ask for things that aren't logical. We have to place demands that will ensure our safety now and extend that to our children growing up in a new generation in this country. I mean, my father, my parents, both of my parents, they're in their 60s. They both grew up in segregated schools. And I'm telling you, it was, and I can see Miss Frenchie's excitement here, but it was exciting for me to grow up in a household where I had two parents who had a front seat view to the changes of history, the changes that were made. By the time I came along, there was no segregation. There was no fighting for equal rights on the large scale as it was then. But here we are now, fighting for an issue that I believe is a human right to live safely in this country that all of us are in. All of us has pledged allegiance at some point to this country's flag. And we all should be ensured the same amount of justice, the same amount of safety in this country as anybody else feels that they have. Because there are some people, I can assure you, there are some black people in this country who racism may not touch. It may not be a everyday issue of their lives. They may not have issues with law enforcement or run-ins with law enforcement that makes them feel unsafe. But there are some in or many in many communities in this country who feel that and feel it every single day. So what can some of us who may not feel those pressures or may not have that or can relate to that same struggle, what can we do together? What can all of us do together to ensure that essentially one day, maybe not now, maybe not soon, maybe not even in the next 100 years, but that someday black people in this country can say, all black people in this country can say that they feel safe. So I just wanted to I just wanted to touch on that and really think on that. Think on the fact that it takes more than just being upset. It takes more than just um, being emotional toward it, but it takes concrete action. It takes meeting with organizations who may fund social justice for Black people. Meet with those organizations. Look up different different places that you can donate to push the movement. Not all people will take to the streets to protest, but there are ways that we can help support one another and help push this movement forward. And I believe, just as a person of color who woke up one day not long ago and felt like I needed to question my safety in this country. You know, why do I get timid when the police ride by, or why do I get timid if I see a law officer in the grocery store or something? I'm not doing anything. I'm minding my business as well as he, but it's not the person that we ought to sometimes look at. Yeah, there are problems with systemic racism in this country, and a lot of it is within our law enforcement. And I have a point on that. And there was one, and Miss Frenchie didn't get this one, but there was one point that I wanted to talk about was the Fugitive Slave Act in the 1800s and how that was the catalyst for the modern day law enforcement in this country. A lot of people were deputized, just anybody, every man. You know, you didn't have to be a slave owner, you didn't have to be an overseer, you could just have been anybody. And they didn't have diversity training in the 1800s. So people were charged, just come take an oath, get a badge, and go out and look for slaves. Not all were slaves, though. Some people were free blacks. Some people were born free blacks. But the Fugitive Slave Act gave white people the opportunity to go and take any person of color into bondage for commission. So there was always a dollar, there was always money going around, but they did that in order to further suppress the people. The white slave owners in the South felt like they were losing money. All our slaves are running, we're losing money. So let's pay somebody, further stimulating their Southern economy. Let's pay somebody to go anywhere up north in the colonies and find anybody. It doesn't even matter. You could have papers and find somebody that does not match the description and bring them in for justice. And how many times have we seen that happen? Since then, since the Fugitive Slave Act, how many times have we seen black people be taken in erroneously at the hands of the law just because they fit the description? So that there is an issue with the system of law enforcement that needs to be checked, because oftentimes we aren't necessarily intimidated by the color of the officer's skin. I've been intimidated by black police officers. It's the badge. It's the badge, and it's the system that the badge stands for. And sometimes I feel like concerning us, concerning black people in America, we are more at threat. We are more endangered by those systems that one badge stands for all across this land. It doesn't even matter to me what country, what state you're in. If the system of law enforcement was built on a racist notion, then it begs to ask the question: are we really safe? Are we safe? Yeah, there are multiple other killings of black people at the hands of anybody. It doesn't have to be law enforcement, but with looking at how often this happens, with the systems that are in place. There was a article on on NBC News that said in Minneapolis, their police department had report of 44 other arrests where people were knocked unconscious using the knee to the neck method. Now, if that's a method by which they have to subdue someone, that's on their books. But are they using any of their methods wisely, carefully, enough to bring justice to a situation? If someone is wrong, can they at least have the opportunity to be tried justly? But we're looking at situations where black people are oftentimes just minding their business and maybe fit the description of something that happened somewhere else. And oftentimes, because you have an officer who may not who may not be so kind, or may not be so racially courteous, I would say, that person's life is then in danger. I mean, from the moment they approach them, that person's life is in danger. And how many times does that have to happen before we can see the situations fixed? We can see a system, a broken system that our law enforcement, which was called to protect and serve, when can we see that system fixed? It was built on systems of hatred. It was built on the idea that someone who may be free can be taken into custody for nothing. When can we fix a system that was built on that philosophy, that anyone is fair game concerning the laws, concerning the methods that have been passed in order for them to go and arrest someone? And so I just wanted to draw that to your attention so that you can think about, sometimes it's not just the racism of the heart with the person, but oftentimes you have to look at where the system comes from. You have to look at the history of where the system is rooted. And our modern day law enforcement can honestly trace its history back to the Fugitive Slave Act. And I believe it's of 1853. Don't quote me on it, but look it up. Look it up. The Fugitive Slave Act. And it happened in the 1800s. And it was meant to take in all blacks, any black, it didn't matter, any black, into custody and be brought back into slavery. So I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. But going back, looking at the killing of George Floyd, we have an executive branch that over time, I believe, has been given the opportunity to bring everyone together. The 45 has been given an opportunity to bring unity to many situations that have happened in this country so far under his administration. But we could see in the moment of his response, we could see in the gestures of his response that he isn't genuinely concerned with the state of Black issues in this country right now. He was not generally concerned with George Floyd's death at all. And we could see that just by his gestures to aim to dominate protesters in a country where we're given right to peacefully protest. And we have an executive branch that is threatening to dominate protesters. He's threatening to use military action to quell these protests. After protests were deemed peaceful, people were peacefully protesting, we could still see at the order of the executive branch, we could see the unrest being fueled by those law enforcement officers and those National Guard officers and those military police officers who have been called out into the field to quell the situation by any means. But people were peacefully protesting. I live in Southern Maryland, and there have been multiple protests in my area. I live in St. Mary's County now, but I went to a protest rally in Charles County the other night. It was completely peaceful. The law enforcement was ultimately powerless. Everyone got up and was very respectful of the time, was very respectful of the place, and everyone after the protest, we marched off, and everything was good. There were no reports of any vandalism, any rioting of any sort. There was one disturbance. Someone honked a horn and said a few words, but other than that, it was fine. I heard that there was a report issued by the Calvert County, and this is in Southern Maryland, the Calvert County Sheriff's Office, that the sheriff was going to march with his people at the protest, that there was going to be arms joined together and there was going to be solidarity between the law enforcement officers and the people protesting. But by the end of the night, there was a report that the crowd had been tear gassed. No one said for what reason, that had happened, but it just struck me as odd as to you would make such a grandiose gesture to say, I will stand with you, I will protest with you. But then by the end of the night, the people are tear gassed. Even if it was for a substantiated reason, that furthers the distrust. If you come to me and say, I will stand with you, but at the end of the night, I see your officers coming at me with tear gas, that doesn't make me, if I'm just the average person at the protest, that doesn't make me feel good. So there's still, I feel like there's still gaps in our protest movements that also need to be addressed in order to bring about change. But if we have someone in the executive branch who is inciting and enticing these violent acts, he's telling people when the looting starts, the shooting starts. That's not how we bring unity. That's not how you bring trust to a situation. Now, any leader would look at the situation and consider themselves in the situation, not just as the leader, but as a citizen of this country, considering if it had happened to them, to give an honest response, a heartfelt response, and a more emotionally connected response to the situation in order to offer arms of peace, in order to offer a doorway or a window to some sort of trust and bridging some gap. But we have not seen that. Even just a few days ago on the news, I feel as though he made a mockery of George Floyd's death by saying because the jobs are up or the economy is doing good, I'm sure George Floyd is looking down and feeling good about this. That is a mockery. And further deepens the wound to his family. So we're looking at a situation that we really have to look at what we're fighting. What are we fighting? To say that you'll deploy military to these places of peaceful protest to disrupt that peace, and then go and have the nerve to hold up the word of God in front of a church that pastor said he hadn't been there since his inauguration. Who is he pandering to? What base is he talking to? What group of people is he trying to offer peace to and calm to? Because it doesn't feel like it's us. It doesn't feel like it's coming to us. So because of that, and in a way, and some of you can message me about this to further this conversation, but in a way, I feel like he's adding fuel to our protest inadvertently, because I feel like the more he pushes, the more we push back, because we are in a state of unrest. We are in a state where there are people who are fed up. There are people who want some sort of change so that they can go to sleep at night and not have to worry about a broken system failing them to the degree where they are killed in their bed, to make sure that we fix a system that is broken so much to the point that it's unsafe sometimes to go jogging in certain areas. Because what I take from Brother Ahmad's situation, those guys said that they were neighborhood watch, just like George Zimmerman said that he was a neighborhood watch official. But what laws are you enforcing other than what I feel like you're just fueling, or you're thriving on that racism and using, and we've seen it, some law officials use the law as an excuse, use the law as a shield to hide behind. So, and there's a lot, but I do want to encourage you to all just stay with it, stay with the movement. There's so much going on that needs to be addressed, and we need to come together and look at how we can move actively, move positively, and make about the change. I was at the rally, and one of the biggest things that I got from the rally that I went to was put pen to paper. If there's anything that we do now, let it be a call to action, so that we don't have to have these types of discussions. We don't have to continue to ask, are we really safe in America? But really putting pen to paper. And if that means writing your local congressional leaders, calling your local congressional leaders, trying to make some type of political movement happen, some type of political action to start, even if it's having to go and vote. when you don't feel comfortable voting, when you feel like it doesn't matter who you vote for, go and vote, because that will bring about change that we want to see in this community. And also educate yourself. Don't just sit idly by and watch all of this happen and not taking any type of education, not taking any fruit of knowledge, because that's where it begins. Is having knowledge enough to ignite the fire, so that way next time we can have more black congressional leaders, more leaders on all sides of the law to ensure to keep the safety. We are safe in America if we keep it, if we maintain it. We can ensure it, not just for ourselves, but for our children. We shouldn't have to ask the question if we're safe or not. We have laws on the books already. But how many more do we need to pass? How much more if we're talking about Stokely Carmichael saying that the laws were passed for them, how many more laws do we need to pass for them so that we can benefit? How many more laws need to be passed? What more needs to be done? But I have to challenge, and I'm glad I have to challenge you all to reach out to different organizations. There's in my notes here I have President Obama's message on Medium.com about how to make the most of this moment and how to make it what he said the true turning point for real change. What can we do? Ask yourself that question now. What can we do? If you feel safe in America, great. If you feel unsafe, what can we do? For the people who are safe, what can you do for the people who are unsafe? What measures can you take to ensure that your brothers and sisters who may be suffering across town or may be suffering in low-income communities, what can you do to make sure that we are all safe? So I encourage you all to go and check that out. It's on medium.com. And all you have to do is search President Obama's name and read that article. There's so much in it to talk about the changes that we need to our criminal justice system and the changes and the reform that we need right now to our laws to ensure our safety. And he also highlights on his website, on the Obama Foundation, he has a section of anguish and action. Yes, we're anguished, but what action will we take? So he has a list of different organizations there that you can donate to and to really support what's going on right now, more so than just taking to the streets. There are more ways that we can solve this issue and bring about real change other than just rioting in the streets and protesting in the streets. There has to be some other form of action. And we all have that responsibility to take that action. And I challenge you all and I charge you all to go and take a look, just research for yourself, to take a look at these organizations and the work that they are doing. Don't just pick one and donate to just because, but really read up on them and take a look at what they're doing and really get a feel for what you feel is more important, what you feel is important to donate and where to send your funds, because the movement, it crosses so many different space, it crosses so many different measures that we have to look at it. But one thing, two of them I do want you to take a look at is the Breonna Taylor Memorial Fund on GoFundMe, also the George Floyd Memorial Fund, and the Nationwide Bail Fund, because there are a lot of people right now who are actually being arrested in these protest movements, and we want to make sure that they see justice as well, while they're fighting for justice for all, that they see their justice as well. So make sure you look them up and donate, out of your heart, just donate and pick one. But I also want to, before we end tonight, because we're a little bit over, but I want to just take a look at the Black church's involvement and the spiritual outlook on what's going on right now. My pastor, Bishop James Briscoe of the Free Gospel Church of Christ in Browns Road, Maryland. He's been my pastor all my life, and shout out to you, Bishop, if you're watching from far. Um, he's he's been preaching lately, and one of the things that he's been saying lately is God is concerned about what you're concerned about, and it's so amazing to be reminded that the Master cares, that He cares about what we all are concerned about, and that He's watching and that He's listening. And if it wasn't so, if He was not concerned in any sense, in any time when Israel was taken into bondage, He would not have sent a deliverer. Even if by their own sin, even if it was their own sin, to cause them to go into bondage, He was concerned about what they were concerned about, and He sent a deliverer. So I encourage you all to meditate on that God is concerned about what you're concerned about. He's concerned about the state of unrest right now. He's concerned about these situations. And I was watching my sister Angela Thornton the other night on IGN Radio, a fellow show here on the station, and she was touching on that, and it was funny because I had been meditating on that thought that God is concerned about these things, and she said it the other night. She said that He cares about all of these things. He does, and that's something that we ought to understand and hold on to when we're in this state of unrest. That we still have a Father in heaven that is sitting on the throne, concerned about these issues, and He's there. And He's only a prayer away. He's only a one call away for us to reach out to heaven and gain understanding and gain encouragement from the Father. So I want to call back on Miss Frenchie for just a couple of minutes so that we can talk about and we can share how we feel about the spiritual outlook. What is the spiritual outlook? What is God saying to His people right now? And I want to touch on that. And I do have a couple of scriptures.
Well, before we go on that, Malcolm, you said a lot of things that I did want to address, but we'll start with the spiritual side because I want to challenge you on something, because you said He cares. You said that God cares. So where is He?
Where is He? He's everywhere if we call on Him.
So are you suggesting that we have not called upon Him?
No. Oh no, that's not what I'm suggesting at all. Because I know that people are calling out. I'm assured that people are praying, and I know that I'm praying myself. But it takes. I feel like it takes sometimes on a temporal side for the church to make a stand. There was an article.
So have not the church made a stand?
Has the church made a stand?
That's the question.
Has the church made a stand? I've seen many churches. I've seen many churches respond to this issue and respond to the state of unrest. And I've seen many churches organize, and that's something that I wanted to talk about was my surprise almost to how many churches are speaking out about it, because I can say that over the years it seemed as though there was a falling away from the church being that center of the Black community, where if things like this had happened, that was the first place we went, was to the church, to the church for refuge, to the church for sanctuary, and to the church to organize. But that action, that concept has kind of fallen away from us over the years. And I wanted to talk about, and when I meant the Black church's involvement, not the lack of involvement, but the fact that the church is there. for anyone. The church is there as that place of refuge, as that place of security, and as that place of sanctuary for people right now. Because there are churches that are speaking out, there are churches that are on the forefront of this. And one of them is my church. My church has offered uh, prayer and counseling for those who are dealing with the situation. They have responded in good measure, and and I'm proud of that. As a member
And
of
I
the church,
understand
I'm
that, but
yeah,
I'm challenging you on this because you said something, and a lot of people who may or may not be watching this may not have a relationship with God,
that's
or the
right,
relationship not may be as strong. So just saying somebody
right.
care doesn't mean a whole lot to me. I mean, I'm just going to just be honest with you. Saying, okay, God
Mhm.
cares, well, then why don't he come down here and do something?
Right.
So I'm just challenging you on that. Well, if he cares so much, then why is he still allowing these things to happen? You said that he's, if you go back to the children of Israel, he sent the deliverer. So where is our deliverer?
We have to ask God that. That's the question. Is in that prayer time. If if we're praying, do we hear from God? You know, and I encourage, like you said, there are some who don't have a relationship with God or don't have as strong relationship with
Mm-hmm.
God. I encourage them all. I encourage you all. If you do not know God, if you do not know Jesus, to get into a church, that believes and is teaching the knowledge of the truth, because it's it's hard for us to come to terms with these things without God on our side, without God in our corner. And for those out there that may not even believe, I pray. I pray that you can receive something from this, because yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people questioning God right
There are a lot of people
now.
questioning God,
Yeah,
and there's nothing wrong with questioning God, but do understand that He
yeah,
is a warrior. He's a strong fighter, and He will rise up
that's right.
through His people. And what I
That's
really
right.
want to emphasize is that God has sent someone, and that's in you, that's in me, that's in the people who are out there fighting.
That's
God
right.
has strengthened people, and we got to be able to understand that in us, God has given us skills. You alluded to it earlier about what can you do? You kept asking, what can you do? Is seeking God. God, I know you care about the situation that we in. I know you
Right.
care. So what is my part in that? Because I know I have a purpose because
Right.
I'm born for such a time as this. What is
Right.
my piece of that pie? We're used to the Malcolm X's. We're used to the
Exactly.
Martin Luther. But in this time, there may not be one single point of contact in that perspective. And
Right.
I allude to the
And
concept of the
you
Black
won't
Life
see that in
Matters.
love.
There's not one leader.
Right.
They have
It's
multiple
a
people.
whole right.
Yes.
It's a whole group.
So
Yeah.
we're seeing leadership even in the smallest groups. And that may be that person
Right.
who may be out sitting there, God may be tugging at their heart that I have sent a deliverer for your sphere of influence, for what you can do.
Right.
And to
Right.
understand that God will give us strength in such a battle. Yeah, we look at what the children of Israel went through in terms of being delivered from out of Egypt. We even use our coming out of slavery as a connection with that.
Yeah.
Malcolm Martin being the Moses of our time doing in the
Yeah.
70s and all. Now, I'm going to tie this all together, but I know we're over our time, and that's okay. We're good. We're still broadcasting. So there's a couple of things that you said that kind of ties into all this, because we got to understand, where is God? Angela also spoke not on that episode on Thursday, but another episode where I asked her, where is God? God has been where He's always been. He's everywhere.
That's
He's
right.
on His throne. He sent His people. Guess what, folks? Sin has come into the world, and we are dealing with some of the consequences of sin. We understand
That's
that.
right.
But glory to God, love will prevail. And I know you mentioned something about rioting. I kind of twitch a little bit when you mention it because I'm going to mention something in reference. I do not condone rioting whatsoever. No, no if, buts, and maybe that's because I'm old school. I understand that. I heard different theories that had they not burned down this and had that they haven't done this,
Yeah,
then this would.
yeah,
But we are still a people of peace. I know they push us to the wall, but how do we fight? We got to understand how we fight. And I want to bring up a
right,
situation of how do we fight that changed America. And I'm going to use the Rosa Parks situation, if I can, because what Rosa Parks did by refusing to get up out of her seat was something phenomenal. What it stirred was that now I'm going to mess with your pocketbook. I'm going to mess with your
that's right,
economy. That's how we change that. By if I don't use your
that's right,
services, I take the money out of your hands. Then you're going to bring me to the table and listen. What do you need? What do you need?
that's right,
And I don't think that we're looking at that. We're talking about, I want to be safe, but there's more than just safety from law
right,
enforcement. I,
right,
you talked about President Trump talking about the economy and how the economy is approved in terms of job report. Now, I have my thoughts on that, but what I wanted to bring out was the fact that if you were still look into the overall unemployment is 13.3% for the month of May. The Latino was
mm-hmm,
17.6. And for the
mm-hmm,
black, it was 16.8% of unemployment. That's high. Now, he may
right.
take a victory lap overall, but still, as a people, we're struggling. It is
Right.
not
I mean,
improving.
even so, the Asian job report, it was up. I think it was up 5%, where African American jobs were up 1%,
Yes, so
and
the Asian is at 15% for the month of May, whites at 12.4.
yeah, and he was touting that as a victory.
Right. So the
You know,
victory. So you asked the
who was the
question.
victory
Then who
for?
was he talking to?
Yeah, yeah.
Because if you
Who was he talking
notice,
to?
Wall Street is doing well, but Main Street is still struggling.
That's right.
So you can be safe and still can't feed your children.
Yeah,
So it's so in terms of our agenda, what is our agenda? Is it just the fact that I want to feel safe, or is it that I need
right,
some opportunities to educate for education in certain neighborhoods, or is it also the discussion of having a better economic opportunities? So I don't think it's just a safety issue. And I think that if we just say, okay, I want safety, then you're right. What's the difference? You get these laws, you get these things that's going to come out. Then what? You still in the same situation you were in yesterday. But until you really impact somebody's economy, you just making a whole lot of
right.
noise. Well, the
That's right.
concept is that, well, wouldn't that coincide with looting and rioting and destroying? No, you destroying your own community.
Exactly.
And some of the people that are even in there is
Yeah.
not even from your community. That's why you see some people, they may hold up, stop. I got to shop at Target. That's the only way I can get some good food. Oh, hold
Yeah.
on. You can't tear that building down. Or you can't tear that organization down because in the end of the day, I still need their services. So,
That's right.
how do we as a group of people strategize in terms of not only developing places of being safe, feeling safe, but also developing the education, also
Right.
developing
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
economy behind those things? Um,
That's what it goes back to. That's what it goes back to is looking at what we can do to move it forward.
right, because you asked, what
Mhm.
can we do beyond the protests?
Right.
So, and you brought up some things that I want to talk about some of the solutions that you brought up. I brought up um, you talked about having solid demands. So I'm gonna challenge you here, activists. What solid demands have you written down, put pen to paper to?
One of them, and it was funny that I heard it at the rally. One of them, I and I've challenged this before was community oversight
Okay.
of local police departments to ensure that there are training measures in place to ensure that there are different tactics in place to protect all people and not leave anyone in any type of disparity. And
Okay.
I feel like that has to come from the general public taking a look at, and I mean it could be an elected board of people, but let it be everyday citizens, no different than calling someone in for jury duty. Let it be everyday citizens who are honest, hardworking, and can give honest oversight if should any time moving forward, should any situation arise where there's unjust policing issues or unjust policing methods in different parts of the community, take a look at it and call it out to make sure that these types of things don't happen again. And can we have uh, you have in some places you have those self-appointed neighborhood watch, you know. And can we have community appointed oversight of these issues in places where we know that there are problems with the law enforcement system, or any black people feeling unsafe? Can we have that in our communities? That was one thing that I was really looking at and had been talking about for some time, even in my community.
So what are you doing about it other than talking about it? I know you didn't want me on your show. Like,
What am I doing about
yes.
it?
I mean, you say
I'm
you're talking
being a,
about it. You talking about some
yeah,
time.
yeah,
So where are you
yeah,
with
because
that?
there's there's space for the discussion, but again, there's been plenty of times where we've had panel discussions. There's been plenty of times where we've had community town hall meetings and all of these types of discussions. But had the work been done, had we convened together to start those actions, to start those things, so it has been an ongoing conversation in the
Okay.
community. But it just it seems as though it keeps taking something like this to remind us that that action does need to be taken, more so than continuing or every time it does happen to have the conversation, because
So so
rightly so the conversation has been had.
so, and I want to tie this up to an earlier thought in reference to is this different? Because I think what's happening now is different than what's been happening since I want to say 2014,
Hmm.
and it could just be because of the way and the how we really watch Mr. Floyd die. We watched that.
Oh yeah,
We that
yeah,
was we watched it, and I think that had triggered something different because we're day 12 of continuous protests.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so I am hoping that this time something is different. So you can even feel there's it's different in terms of these protests and these
Right.
conversations that we have. Now, with that, alongside of that, I'm writing your notes because I'm holding you accountable for the community oversight in your area. So I got your name and date on
Yeah.
this. You can't let that ball fall because we got
Oh
you
no.
on record. The other thing I want to talk
Well,
about
yeah.
is relationship because you talked about the officer who was going to march and then later on that night things kind of change. But one of the things that what we're trying to see, what seemed to be happening, is that now we're starting to bridge relationship. Because I
Right.
wonder, Malcolm, to be truth be told, that if you would feel so uncomfortable if you had a relationship with the law enforcement.
I wouldn't. And to be honest, I I have had, as a community activist, I have had a good working relationship with my local law enforcement. Um, and when I was a very much younger man, as a young teen, I had issues that had me on the other side of the law. But since becoming a community activist, I can say I've had a very good working relationship that has made me feel safe, and has made me feel safe in my community because I know I can see up front through
Mm-hmm.
working with them what their intention is. I can see by looking them in the eye and asking them the hard questions and really trying to get a honest response from them. I can see that they are committed, and these are the officials that I
Right.
know personally, that I can say they are committed to fostering relationships that they've already gone out into the community to build, not just not just in the low income communities, but also with
Mm-hmm.
um, black people predominantly. There have been, especially in Charles County where I live, even in school, a lot of the schools that I grew up in were, relatively kind of majority, classroom was majority black at times.
Mm-hmm.
And when we had officers come to visit, there was always mentoring programs and
Okay.
different
Mm-hmm.
types of things that tried to reach across into those low income communities. So I can say that most of the law officials that I know personally are working with working with us as community activists and working with the local organizations that we are affiliated with to bring about a good standing relationship between police and community. And
So, would you suggest more of that community building between law enforcement?
yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely, because there has to be. We can't. And I said this at the rally on last week. I said to the young people, there are situations that we can't undo. There are problems that we may not be able to fix, but it starts with having a unified effort around what we will do. Like you said, all of us in our individual capacities have enough power to, within ourselves, make change available in our parts of the community. But can we unify that effort?
Mm-hmm.
Can we come together and be on one accord to bring about that change? You know, and that's something that I'm proud to see in my community, is that the law enforcement is willing, and they have showed, they haven't just said, but they have showed that they are willing to work in arms with different organizations to continue to foster those relationships.
I was trying to find. I have it here. Um, let's see. You asked the question: who was President Trump trying to appease when he went over to the church? Now we all kind of know who he's trying to appease.
Oh yeah, yeah,
So there is no mystery that he's trying to connect, because we are in the election year.
yeah.
This is election year 2020. As a matter of fact, Joe
And
Biden
he's
reaches 1991 um, the delegates that he needed. So he is
yep.
now the one that will be on the ticket. So we know that he is doing two things. This is President Trump. We understand that he is talking to his comrades with Wall
Yeah.
Street. We also understand, which is one of the reasons why we didn't see some of the churches, and I'm not necessarily meaning black church, that did not speak out on some of the things that he's done. Because
Hmm.
some of the conservative Christian concepts Trump has pushed forward, he has talked about.
Yeah.
So, so truth be told, we know who he's referring to. And truth be told, some of the things that he has done has allowed the church to sit comfortably in their pews without saying anything, because he is pushing some of their agenda items. Let's call it what it is. And along with that same concept, the church, the body of Christ, because you, in one of your scriptures, in one of your scriptures, in that same chapter, it talks about the body.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only one body that the Lord is going to come back for. Only one church,
Right.
without spot or without a wrinkle. And the whole thing is that you have a church on earth that is divided.
That's right.
Multiple personalities.
That's right.
I'm going to say it. I know. Email me. That's all right. I can prove it.
I've heard someone say the most segregated day in
That
America
is Sunday.
Sunday morning.
It's
At
Sunday.
11 o'clock. Absolutely.
It is Sunday.
So to me, that makes me question whose church?
Whose church?
Whose church?
Because one of the
Whose
things,
church?
and I will echo Angela on this one, God is not concerned whether you are a Baptist.
That's right.
He's not concerned whether you call yourself a Pentecostal. What he's concerned about is that you have a relationship and that you are following after his ways and in his will.
That's right.
He's concerned about your soul salvation. And so, but if a person, a human person, have multiple personalities, we would medicate them. I'm going to leave that at the table right there. I already talked about more than safety. We got to look at education and economy. You brought something up that I thought was amazing, because you said something about some of the things that we may want to start doing. We may not, it may not be made before our children or our children's children. Yeah. And it's interesting that you said that, because I wish I would have wrote a date on this, but I was looking at some scriptures about how we need to adjust our vision. And I'm going to share this with you offline, actually. And it talks about a strategic plan, because you said put the pen to paper.
Yeah.
That's
Habakkuk.
I put a pen to paper, and a plan that blesses and positions through the generation.
Oh, yeah.
Because I know a lot of times we want to be comfortable right now. Amen to that. I'll say that for myself. But I'll be honest.
Yeah.
But
and that's what we want.
We need to look at a plan that blesses and position us as a people through generation. And I think about some people call the 7 mountains or the 7 social spheres.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about education, religion, family, business, government, military, arts, entertainment, and media. And there are things that we can do in terms of action.
Yeah.
Do we need a one Moses or Martin? I beg to differ. We don't. But I do think that as a community, we should still have a strategy moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some people, and right now we're doing a lot of thoughts in terms of government and military. But someone also got to be pushing that education agenda. Someone got to be pushing that religion and family and business. Someone got to be pushing the arts and entertainment. And someone got to be pushing the media. Because there's segregation in all of those spheres of influence.
Absolutely.
And I wish we had time. I would have loved for you to do the Maya Angelou, Still I Rise. But we're going to get there one day. But so in turn, and I'm going to put my pen to paper, because you challenged me on that. But there was a young lady by the name of Tiffany Lofton. She's actually, I looked up, she's the director of the NAACP Youth and Campus Division. And the other day she was speaking about action items. And I'm going to be finishing on this one. She brought up about 4 action items. And I was like, she got me on that one. She said first one was to find a political home. And wasn't necessary that you have to find a political home somewhere in Washington, D.C., but in your own neighborhood, find
Right.
a political home.
Right.
And she says, simply take action. And it doesn't have to be some huge, grandiose thing. It could be something as small as having a tutorial or tutoring children.
Mm-hmm.
Education is part of the agenda, education.
Absolutely.
And the other thing she talked about was voting. Third thing she talked about was voting. She said it's not sufficient. She understood that, but it's necessary. And I liked how she tied it up because, in terms of voting, she says, now, you may all be familiar, she didn't say these exact words, with the our president elections and the congressional. But if you don't even know your local mayor name, or
That's
the
right.
or the your attorney general, or the sheriff department, depending where you are, we got another problem. We got another discussion.
Right.
Because a lot of these changes are going to happen at those levels.
And that's where
Grassroots.
it begins. It begins, yeah. Boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground. Boots on the ground. So knowing who is in your local area, knowing that, for example, that if I'm not mistaken, Baltimore has an election coming up, a mayor election. Manassas, Virginia has a mayor election. Virginia Beach has a mayor election. You have the congressional, Virginia and Maryland. They got also the presidential. These are all coming up in November. This is a good time to get educated as who's running for mayor in Baltimore, who's running for mayor in Manassas and Virginia Beach, who's running for the congressional and Senate position. The last thing that she said, and I'm done at this one, she said, hold officials accountable. Similar to what you said, holding
That's
those
right.
officials accountable. But in order for you to hold an official accountable, you got to, A, vote.
That's
I'm
right.
telling you, if
That's where it starts. That's exactly where it starts.
otherwise you don't got a voice. Because
Right.
congressionally, they're gonna look, is that a voter or that's just somebody who's making a lot of noise?
Right.
But you also got to know who those people you need to hold accountable for.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I went
Absolutely.
over your notes. I know I went over more than you asked me for. But in terms of the church, yes, the church has always been the center of civil
Oh yeah.
rights back in the 60s. We've led so many different things. We've got so many examples in the Word of God of how God has delivered and oppressed, suppressed, depressed people. So we have a blueprint. But one of the things
That's
is
right.
that we were united. And
That's right.
a body that's divided cannot stand. It's schizophrenia. It
That's
needs to
right.
be medicated. So
That's
as a
right. And
body,
I encourage.
we got to either come off the medication, get
Yeah.
ourselves healed, so that we can be there for the people that
Yeah.
are hurting. We got to be
Yeah.
healed.
And I encourage everyone to take a look at First Peter chapter 3. I encourage you to take a look at that entire chapter. That
Yeah,
entire chapter.
you got some good ones.
As well as yeah, as well as Habakkuk chapter 2. You say
Have back
you
there.
say, what can we do? And the Lord said it right there to write the vision.
Make
And
it
that's what
plain.
we're talking in the paper. Write the vision, make it plain, that he may run who reads it. So if your vision isn't causing somebody to get up, run out there and get about it, then
It's not plain. It's too complicated.
right, right.
Amen.
So it has to be plain. We have to make plain the demands we have, and make plain the change that we want now, that we want to see begin after all of this.
And the interesting thing about Habakkuk, that Habakkuk challenged God before he got his answer.
Mm-hmm.
He questioned God. He said, I will sit and see what he will say.
Yep.
And when he got it,
but he said to Terry.
He
So
said to Terry,
can
but it
we
will not tarry.
can we wait? It will
But it
not.
will not tarry. Though it tarry, it will not tarry. We're
Amen. So
closer
can
than we ever
yeah,
been. We're definitely closer than we ever been.
and
Malcolm,
we
thank you
really
so
gotta
much.
keep that momentum up.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to sign out myself and let you do what you do.
Absolutely.
And I know we actually over about, what's that? An hour and 40 minutes. But it was
Amen.
necessary
Amen.
conversation. This is the first of many, and there's a lot. You had an ambitious agenda, and I wanted to afford you the opportunity to really get that out. And I'm going to even challenge you. I'm going to even challenge you more on black and white. Is that you start taking those pieces and really reaching out and inviting people on to black and white and seeing how we can actually move beyond
Oh yeah.
talk.
Oh yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
move beyond talk.
I definitely want to look to have on, and if there are any community leaders that may have viewed or may be watching, to reach out to me, and let's talk about bringing you on so we can lay out what the plan is. We've asked the questions, we've done the protesting, we've chanted, we've done all the performative acts of activism, but let's sit down and lay out the plan. Let's do what the word says in Habakkuk and write this vision. Let's make it plain so that we can get what we want and we get what we need for our people in this country today. So I just want to thank you all for coming on tonight. I know it's been a heavy topic to deal with, but I hope that we've all shed some light. I hope that you've enjoyed listening to what I've had to say, and I thank Miss Princess Frenchie, for coming on and chatting with me a bit, talking about um, asking that question: Are we really safe in America? And talking about what the church's involvement is and what the spiritual outlook is for this. And I just encourage everyone to do exactly what we've said, to put pen to paper, to think of ways that you can use your talents and abilities, no matter where you are, no matter what capacity you're in, to use those abilities to forward this movement and push this thing forward so that we can see true change in this generation. And I thank you all for tuning in tonight. Stay tuned for our next episode where we will be looking at what the plan is. We will be laying out the plan. And I encourage you all to just tune in again and be blessed. And I thank you all again. Good night.